Can I refuse a breath test for a DUI in Wyoming or South Dakota? This is Christina Williams with Just Criminal Law.
And David Mann, legal storytelling specialist. Yeah, we've talked about DUIs before, and I guess I've always wondered this same question. So it's so counterintuitive to think I can refuse to take a breathalyzer when the policeman is telling me I'm supposed to. So maybe explain that. Do you have to?
No, you don't have to take a breathalyzer, and there's 2 times during a DUI when you might be asked to do it. That is before you get arrested and after you get arrested. So when you're out on the side of the road and you're going through your field sobriety test, the officer, as part of one of the tests, may ask you to take a breathalyzer test. And it is voluntary. You don't have to take it. And I recommend that you don't, because it's just one more piece of evidence that the officer can testify in court about if we decide to try to fight the DUI for a bad arrest. So you don't have to take it, and I advise that you don't.
Okay, so that's where I've always, just to represent the average person, I can understand how people might think, yeah, but if I've barely had any to drink, but I'm not really sure if I'm over the line or not, but I think I'm probably not over the line, shouldn't I just say, sure, officer, I'll do that, because then it's going to go smoothly for me because it's probably going to be under, rather than risk refusing it and then making the officer get antagonistic and make everything worse for you? That's kind of what I think goes through some people's minds sometimes.
Yes, and what you have to keep in mind is that the officer has a body camera on, and so the officer knows however he acts, that's going to be looked at by the defense attorney, possibly the prosecutor, possibly the judge. And so the officer isn't going to exercise any retribution or, make it worse for you just because you say, no, I don't want to take that test. That test is typically given at the very end of the DUI investigation when the officer has already, given you all of the other tests. They've already made up their mind they're going to arrest you. And if I have any problem with what they did, or I say, I think that's a close call and you probably shouldn't have arrested my client, that breath test is going to be used against you when the judge says, no, what the officer did was fine. And so it's not to your advantage. It only helps the officer. And if he's gotten to that point where he asks you to take one, he's already made the decision to arrest you.
Okay, well, that's good. I mean, that's good to reassure everyone. I know I had this question about, but it seems so counterintuitive to not do it because it makes you look guilty. But you're saying it'll be fine. It can't really get worse.
No, it can't get worse. And a lot of people think that if I don't do that, or if I don't make a statement, or if I don't cooperate, then it looks like I'm guilty of something. And, this isn't true. The officer actually respects that. They know if the person says no and, is respectful, they're exercising their rights. And they're actually just being smart and knowing that they don't have to say yes.
Yeah, and that's a message that we've given a lot in these, and I think it's good to repeat all the time, which is that, that you have the power. If you don't have to do everything that you are asked to do by the officer every time, and this is one of those things. So it's empowering to think you can have that power. But I also want to point out, I think because we talked before, we're talking about Wyoming right now. And this is something that isn't necessarily true of all states. So if someone is from Wyoming and used to these laws and follows what we're saying in these conversations, but then they travel over to South Dakota, then what happens?
Sure. So, things change. Once you get arrested, then, the DUI investigation is over. So there's the breath test on the side of the road, and no matter where you are, you can refuse that. Then there's the breath test that happens after your arrest, or the blood test. That is, they want a sample. And by law, everybody who has a driver's license agrees that if they're arrested, that is validly arrested, the arrest was good, they will submit to a sample of their blood, breath, or urine. And this is part of having a driver's license. It's an agreement that you have with your state. And so when you refuse to take this test in Wyoming, which again, you have the option of a breath test in Wyoming, then the officer will simply apply for a search warrant for your blood and explain to the judge, that is, they'll call the judge on the phone, day or night, Monday through Friday, or, on the weekend, there is a judge that's going to answer that officer's call and explain to the judge why they arrested you and ask for a search warrant. And, I would say 99% of the time, the judge is going to sign off on that warrant, and then you're going to be required to supply a sample of your blood. And so you don't have to take the breath test, but then they're going to ask for a warrant, and then you do have to take the blood test. And that's in Wyoming. Now, in South Dakota, they don't have a breath test. They just have a blood test. And again, you can refuse to take the blood test, but in South Dakota, there's an extra consequence if you refuse to take the blood test, and then they have to get a search warrant to draw your blood. They also suspend your license. So they will take your license for just refusing to do the blood test. And they also can use that refusal as evidence against you if you want to take your case to trial. That is, they tell the jury, this person refused to give a blood test, and so then the jury is allowed to wonder, well, why didn't you submit to that test? Again, you must think that you were guilty or you would have submitted. And so that's kind of an argument at trial they can use in South Dakota.
So what we know here is that laws change from state to state. So it's important to just be aware that laws are not always the same in your home state, no matter where you drive. But if someone has trouble in this way in either Wyoming or South Dakota, they can call you. And how do they do that?
Sure. We'll include a link in the description where they can call, text, or chat with a member of my team anytime, day or night. Here at Just Criminal Law, we know you only get one shot at justice, so make yours count.